All right. Good day, everybody. Ladies, gentlemen, adults, old and young. Welcome. My name is Christ. I am disciple. As you can see from the topic, from the title, we will be looking at saving cinema, some of Martin Scorsese's statements, and particularly saving cinema, some of Martin's. This is going to actually be particularly relevant to each and every one of you guys because for those of you who are looking at Restore the Snyderverse, it's going to make a lot of sense. So let's just get into it. First and foremost, how do you support this channel? You can support this channel through PayPal. The link is in the chat. So if you would like to donate to my channel, because this is a business I run, and you want to, you like the content that I give all the time, and you would like to make it a donation, you can donate online via PayPal. All right. The other thing I want to say is you don't have to talk to me only in the chat. You can come on here as a guest. If you're a Snyderverse fan, hey, I don't care who you are. You can be a fan of anything. You could not be a fan. You could just be a casual person passing by, hearing me talk about something that I'm talking about, and decide to comment on here. No problem. Come in as a guest. All right. Now, for those of you who know how this thing goes, I start off always acknowledging the Most High God first. So I start off with scripture. So I will be starting off with a long piece of scripture today. But you guys, it has relevance to what we're talking about. So it's very important that you guys go along with me on this. It's going to be long. I'm just letting you know right now. After that, we will talk about Martin Scorsese's past statements where he commented on cinema, and particularly he commented on comic book movies. All right. And people have been misrepresenting what he's been saying. People have been saying all kinds of different statements out there about him, you know, that he's saying all comic book movies are not cinema and stuff like that. We're going to get to the bottom of it because we're actually going to get his exact words and what he actually said. And then you guys can either agree or disagree with him. I'm going to tell you from the jump, I agree with him. And so if you think that he's just talking about comic book movies, I think you're wrong. We'll also talk about his recent statements that he had where he spoke about cinema again, and he was speaking about this very same topic that he spoke about in 2019. And he did it in a GQ interview where he was pretty much promoting his upcoming movie, which will be in theaters, as well as it's also, I believe it's on Amazon Prime. So it'll be in Amazon Prime, and it's also in conjunction with Paramount. It'll be put out into cinemas, and that is Killers of the Flower Moon. Killers of the Flower Moon, which I'm definitely going to the cinema to see if it's available in the cinema, because that's a movie that's actually based on real life history. Certain things that happened that were not emphasized on or documented, and definitely I'm going to see it. Of course, Leonardo DiCaprio is in that. You know, he works with Leonardo all the time. He also we're going to talk about something he said. He said that, you know, some of these blockbuster comic book movies are manufactured content. And he had a certain statement about that, and he wanted to talk about that. I'm not going to say what it is. We'll go into that. We'll also listen to another auteur director in Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve, or Villeneuve, I think he's Villeneuve. He's French. I believe Denis said some things also on comic book movies and cinema. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk also about WBD's direction when it comes to DC and DC Studios. And we'll also talk about Restore the Snyderverse and how Zack Snyder's Justice League in IMAX fits into this whole equation, and where is it in the scheme of things? Is it part of cinema? Is it going to save cinema? Can cinema be saved? And all of this stuff. Okay, so that's what we're going into. So you guys know what I'll be talking about. I listed it out for you guys. let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is look at a piece of scripture, as always. Now, I was actually eating a meal, so you guys will have to kind of excuse me because I haven't caught a meal earlier on today. So I'm eating a meal while I do this. I know people don't like me eating meals while I'm doing these things, but sometimes I got to do it. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And we'll be going through in elaborate detail. Now, there are lots of people that, okay, there's lots of people out there, lots of people who are very dismissive about, believe it or not, blockbusters and franchises which they know the studios are building up. There are a lot of people out there who like organic material. What I mean by that is when I say the word organic, I mean material that is not feeding off of or riding some sort of wave from another piece of material in terms of authenticity. So there's this critique about sequels. A sequel generally is not as good as the original because, the studio gets involved and they would splash a lot of cash, and then all of a sudden the studio is, dabbling in the movie and saying it has to be this and it has to be that and it has to be this, and that spoils the authenticity of the film and the organic nature of it. Okay, so I'm saying all of this in the context of what I'm about to read to you. As you can see, I'm going to go into scripture first. For me, the Most High God comes first. I'm sorry, I'm not a perfect person by any means or imagination, but regardless of how I, fall and fail, Most High has been kind to me. He's been gracious to me. And so while I'm doing this video, you have to understand the first person I must acknowledge when I put these videos out is the Most High. Whether you believe in the Most High, you don't believe in the Most High, it's irrelevant to me. I have to. And I'm going to spend an inordinate amount of time, first of all, speaking about the Most High before I even go to this topic. But what I'm about to say is in perfect context to what I will be talking about. So it might be a slow burn, but do bear with me because when I speak from this perspective, understand there is a point to it. And therefore, do please feel and do really hang with me to the end. If you can't hang with me to the end, it's okay. Usually these videos take between half an hour to 2 hours. I don't know where it will fall. But what I can tell you is if you stay with the slow burn, you will get a comprehensive visualization of what cinema is. And also, it will also tell you a little bit more about why what we're doing is so impactful, so important. And you may look at movies a different way when we're finished with it. So we'll see. I don't know. I said you may. I didn't say you. You may have the same views I have. You never know. All right. So the scripture is coming from John chapter 7. And this chapter is very long. Oh, sorry. My bad. Yes, it's coming from John chapter 7. My page turn. I'm reading from the New Living Translation of the Bible for anybody who's really interested in that. Okay, so I'm about to read. It's a very long chapter. It has 53 verses. I'm going to read to give you context for what I'm about to say, because what I'm about to say is short in terms of what the scripture is leading up to, but in actuality, it is very poignant and very important. So I want to give you the perfect context for it. Let me get into it. All right. Let me give you a little context before I even go into that. So this John chapter 7 is about Jesus, and Jesus went up into Jerusalem because there was the Jewish festival of shelters they were celebrating in Jerusalem in the temple. And so Jesus was going up into there. But see, he couldn't just go up in there just like that, because the leaders of these synagogues and the leaders of his faith, his Jewish faith, wanted to kill him because he had healed a man on what is their sacred day called Shabbat. And on Shabbat, back then, you weren't supposed to be doing any works. Even though it was healing and doing something good, you weren't supposed to be doing it. So he violated that rule, and they thought he should be put to death for it. So he couldn't be in the centralized. Jerusalem is the center of Israel. It's a central place where people came down, just like, you know, Muslims go to Mecca to do their, well, Jerusalem was like the main center where they, you know, all of the Jewish people would come down for certain festivals. And in this case was the Festival of Shelters. This is a lot of information for you guys, but bear with me. So anyway, they wanted to kill him. So he couldn't just go. He was in Galilee at the time. He couldn't just go down. Galilee was like the hood. Okay. Galilee was where all the criminals and where all the bad people came from. And Jesus grew up in Galilee. So Jesus was part hood. Okay. He was part ghetto. Okay. Anyway, Jesus was up in Galilee. So, you know, the Jewish leaders, and they wouldn't go down into Galilee. You know what I'm saying? They ain't gonna try and go in there and get killed, you know, and get smoked. Jesus grew up in Galilee. So anyway, Jesus, he goes down into Galilee, all right? And he's there. His brothers and his family go up into Jerusalem, but he doesn't go up into Jerusalem because he knows they're plotting to kill him. He already knows this, right? So he's moving up. So they go away and they're going on their way. Okay, good, cool. So they were like, his family was clueless. So they were like, man, you should go up into Jerusalem so that people could see you and see that you conduct all these miracles and stuff. They don't know. His family didn't have no clue that, you know, they was trying to kill him. So this is where, putting that context in, I'm about to talk to you guys. When Jesus' brothers and sisters and family left to go to the festival, I'm going to read from here. It's verse 10. Jesus also went to the festival, but he went secretly, staying out of public view. The Jewish leaders tried to find him at the festival and kept asking if anyone had seen him. So he was going incognito. He was moving real quiet, right? There was a lot of discussion about him among the crowds because his fame had spread all over the world, right? In fact, after he raised the dead, after he raised Lazarus, this was after he raised a man back to life, right? His fame spread all the way to the Greeks. So back in the then known world, because this is something 2,000 years ago, in the then known world, all right, Rome had conquered Jerusalem and conquered a number of nations. The Roman power was really rising. Caesar was there. There were Caesars that, but even so, like how it used to be back in the day, even if they conquered your nation, they still let your king live, and he would just make a treaty with them that he'd have to pay taxes to them and stuff like that. And then that nation now would serve them, but they still kept their integrity. The structure of their nation still stayed in place. So Rome had conquered Israel, but there was a pharaoh there, and they were allowed to practice their religion there still. So they were still practicing their religion. So as a result of that, Jesus was incognito there, but the leaders of the religion, the Jewish leaders, they who endorsed the leader who was called a Herod. So Herod, when you hear the word Herod, it's not a person, it's not a name, it's a title. So the leader of Israel, the king of Israel, was called Herod. Okay. So there was a king of Israel who agreed to staying under the Roman rulership. There were Roman soldiers in Israel, obviously, because they were patrolling the area. And then there was the Jewish leadership, what we call the synagogue, okay, and the leaders there, scribes and the leaders of the Jewish faith, the priests and so on. So anyway, the Jewish leaders, they tried to find him at the festival. They were asking everyone if they've seen him. There was a lot of discussion about him among the crowds, right? Because his fame had spread beyond Jerusalem. It spread to the world now, okay? The Greeks knew about him. The Romans knew about him. The Egyptians knew about him, okay? All around the world, people started knowing about this guy. This guy was blowing up big. There was a lot of discussion about him, and you will see similarities to what I'm about to say So it's going to make sense to you guys in a minute. That's why I have to take all this time to explain this story. Okay. There was a lot of discussion about him among the crowd. Some said he's a wonderful man, while others said he's nothing but a fraud, deceiving the people. So he was a controversial figure. Okay. You know, he was a controversial figure. I hope you guys are following me on this, because this, again, you know, if you're talking about mythos, if you're talking whatever, he was a controversial figure. So I'm bringing this to you guys live so you guys get it. But no one had the courage to speak favorably about him in public, for they were afraid of getting in trouble with the Jewish leaders. Then, midday, through the festival, Jesus went up into the temple and began to teach. The Jewish leaders were surprised when they heard him. How does he know so much when he hasn't studied everything we have studied? They asked, right? So he was teaching in the synagogue incognito, meaning he was teaching, but the way how he went up in there, you know, he was behaving differently, or not necessarily behaving differently, but he probably was dressed differently, so they didn't recognize him, right? And they were like, how is this guy? Maybe he thought he had the turban up, and maybe he just saw his eyes, and he probably had the thing around his mouth for the snow, the dust or whatever. So they didn't recognize him. So the Jewish leaders were surprised when they heard him. How does he know so much when he hasn't studied anything we've studied? They asked. I want you to bear that in mind. Keep that nugget in your head. So Jesus told them, I'm not teaching my own ideas, but those of God who sent me. Anyone who wants to do the will of God will know whether my teaching is from God or merely his own. Those who present their own ideas are looking for praise for themselves. But those who seek the honor of the one who sent them are good and genuine. None of you obeys the law of Moses. In fact, you're trying to kill me. Right? Now, once he said that, boom, the crowd replied, you're demon possessed. Who's trying to kill you? Now he's talking to the leaders. He wasn't talking to the crowd, but nonetheless. Jesus replied, I worked on the Sabbath by healing a man, and you were offended. But you work on the Sabbath too, when you obey Moses' law of circumcision. Actually, this tradition of circumcision is older than the law of Moses, and it goes back to Abraham. For if the correct time for circumcising your son falls on the Sabbath, you go ahead and do it, so as not to break the law of Moses. So why should I be condemned for making a man completely well on the Sabbath? Think this through, and you will see I am right. Well, by now they know it's Jesus, right? It don't matter what, they know who it is now. Some of the people who lived there in Jerusalem said among themselves, isn't this the man they are trying to kill? But here he is speaking in public, and they say nothing to him. Can it be that our leaders know he's really the Messiah? But how could that be? For we know where this man comes from. When the Messiah comes, he will simply appear. No one will know where he comes from. While Jesus was teaching in the temple, he called out, yes, you know me. You know where I come from. Like he's answering them. But I represent one you don't know, and he is true. I know him because I've come from him, and he sent me to you. Then the leaders tried to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him because his time had not yet come. So they wanted to arrest him, but they couldn't arrest him, right? Many among the crowds at the temple believed in him. After all, they said, would you expect the Messiah to do more miraculous signs than this man has done? When the Pharisees heard that the crowds were murmuring such things, they and the leading priests sent temple guards to arrest Jesus. So they did send people to arrest him. This is what they were saying before. They were saying, they tried to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him. So here's where they're trying to arrest him right here. But Jesus told them, I will be here a little longer, then I will return to the one who sent me. You will search for me, but you will not find me. You won't be able to come where I am. The Jewish leaders were puzzled by this statement. Where is he planning to go? They asked. Maybe he's thinking of leaving the country and going to the Jews in other lands, or maybe even to the Gentiles. What does he mean when he says, you will search for me, but you will not find me, and you won't be able to come where I am? So it was like a riddle to them because they didn't understand what he was saying. I'm not going to say what he's saying either for this moment. On the last day, so he's there in the temple teaching all kinds of things, and they're touching him. They wanted to touch him. They tried to arrest him, but nobody was willing to arrest him, not even the guards. Okay. On the last day, the climax of the festival, Jesus stood and shouted to the crowds. Because if you're going to arrest him, you have to say what you're arresting him for. And they just didn't know what to think. On the last day, the climax of the festival, Jesus stood and shouted to the crowds, "If you are thirsty, come to me. If you believe in me, come and drink. For the scriptures declare that rivers of living water will flow out from within." And when he said living water, he was speaking of the Holy Spirit, right? Who would be given to everyone believing in him. But the Spirit had not yet been given because Jesus had not yet entered into his glory. When the crowds heard him say this, some of them declared, "This man is truly a prophet." Others said, "He is the Messiah." Still others said, "He can't be. Will the Messiah come from Galilee?" Because, I mean, will the Messiah come from the hood? Galilee was a terrible place, by the way. For the scriptures clearly state that the Messiah will be born from the royal line of David in Bethlehem, the village where King David was born. So the crowd was divided in their opinion about him, and some wanted him arrested, but no one touched him. Because he's confusing everybody. You know what I'm saying? He's talking this, and he's talking really like powerful. Like he's talking like this is not something, you know, like he learned somewhere. Nah, that's why they said he didn't seem learned, but he knows all this stuff. He knows more than we even know. What's going on here, right? The temple guards who had been sent to arrest him returned to the leading priests and Pharisees, saying, and the leading priests and Pharisees said, "Why didn't you bring him in?" They said, "We never heard anyone talk like this," the guards responded. And then they said, "Have you been led astray?" They mocked him. "Is there a single one of us rulers or Pharisees who believes in him? These ignorant crowds do, but what do they know about it?" I want you to keep a mental note on that too. A curse on them anyway. Nicodemus, the leader who had met with Jesus earlier, then spoke up. "Is it legal to convict a man before he has been given a hearing?" he asked. They replied, "Are you from Galilee too? Search the scriptures and see for yourself. No prophet ever comes from Galilee." Then the meeting broke up and everybody went home. All right. Bam. That was the scripture. It was long, but I really enjoyed it because there are some points I want to bring out from it. And I will re-elaborate on these points as we go down the road. Now, whether you believe in what I believe is irrelevant. This scripture was given so you could see, whether you believe it's a myth or whether you believe it's the truth, that the same thing is happening again. And it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again. Okay? Because human nature don't change. All right, ladies and gentlemen? And I want to break it down for you. Let's talk about Zack Snyder first. Zack Snyder comes out, puts out movies. The movies are marvelous. They're layered, right? We know this. But a lot of people are controversial. A lot of people say, no, they're not layered at all, right? They will come with something, the absolute opposite. He don't think much. He's not very articulate. He can't articulate himself. His movies are whimsical. His movies are spectacular to watch, but they're just style over substance. You've heard this before, right? Controversial figure, Zack Snyder. Controversial director, Zack Snyder, right? Oh, he loves Iron Rand. He's a right wingist. They started fabricating lies and blaspheming and all kinds of stuff, right? About the guy, right? Oh, this guy, Zack Snyder hates Superman. You've heard it. You've heard the gambit of stuff, right? What's going on? But where's the facts? Where's the facts behind it, right? You check this out. Jesus was a controversial figure. I'm not trying to compare. I'm not saying Zack Snyder is Jesus. Don't get it twisted, right? I don't worship no man. I don't bow down to no man. But what I'm saying is the same way how they treat Jesus, who was perfect, at least according to the lore, is the same way how they treated Superman and BVS. Is the same way how they treat Zack Snyder, who's shaking up the comic book movie world. It's the same way how they treated Tim Burton, who shook up the comic book world. It's the same way how they treated Alfred Hitchcock when he started shaking up the world, and he was bringing something to the table that all these supposedly knowledgeable scribes, all the authorities in the thing, they were suddenly taken aback because it was a lash on them. Because when these directors, these singular directors, start to speak about us, when the stuff starts to come home, when we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and have some introspection and lash people in the face for the atrocities that they do, and that's what these movies speak about, suddenly people got a problem with them. Okay? People got a problem with them. And we saw it with Superman. Superman was a slap in the face to Lex Luthor. He was doing everything right. He was a kind guy. He was trying to do his best with the power, immense power he had. But what do we all know? They say absolute power corrupts absolutely. Dan, you saying that God is corrupt? Absolutely. That's what Lex Luthor was saying. If you say there's an absolute power, then he must be corrupted absolutely. If you saying that there is a kind, considerate, loving God, then he cannot be all powerful, right? That was his philosophy. And Superman slapped that in the face. And Superman was all powerful, seemingly all powerful. And he was kind. He was considerate. He was thinking about the other person. He was trying to help humanity become better. And in this narcissistic world where everybody's for themselves, Lex Luthor could not see that. Guess what? You and I, many a time, in many of our conversations, we behave just like Lex Luthor. It's not just the executives. It's not just WB. Yeah, you don't want to palm it off. No, let's get it personal now. You and I sometimes are nihilistic. You and I sometimes, we are narcissistic. Sometimes we look at the world around us and we don't think they're good people in it, in high levels of power. How many times have you guys spoken ill about your leaders? How many times? Y'all, come on now. From conspiracy theories to, oh, they all sadistic. They all want us dead. Come on now. We just take a black cloth and we just slap everybody in the face with that. So much now that we don't even, no matter who's in power, no matter how much they may be doing something right, we're so narcissistic, we're so negative thinking, we're so evil surmised, the person just got to slip up once and we tear them down. Yeah? Come on now. Because we talking scripture here. But the scenario plays over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. Okay, I'm going to show you something. So we talked about Zack Snyder. We talked about we're live. Yeah, the video is still going. All right, just checking. We talked also about Tim Burton and all these people for WB with DC films. But I want to go a little bit broader, and then I'm going to shrink it back down to the topic at hand before I go to what Martin Scorsese says. A lot of times, if you know more than other people about something, or you think you do, that knowledge swells up our heads. And we feel that we're more powerful, we're better off than other people. BVS was a great movie for that reason, because Lex Luthor was that kind of guy. He felt he was so knowledgeable, more knowledgeable than everybody else. He deserved to have more clout and more power than everybody else, right? All of us at some point in our lives have done this. We felt, oh, I know more than you, or I think I'm right and you're in the wrong. So I just started to blast the smithereens the other person. And I got this ego and I'm all, oh, I really am authority on this. You don't know nothing about this. And you go in on somebody, right? Well, guess what? The Jewish leaders, they thought they knew it all. They thought they knew it all. And Jesus slipped right under their nose. In fact, they knew it so much. They were so overconfident. They was looking for Jesus, and he slipped into the temple, and he was teaching in the temple under their noses. They was investigating all kinds of different people, and he came in, and he was there teaching under their nose. Subversive. You know, a lot of times, because of ego and arrogance, or head so big, or ears is not to the ground. Remember, Jesus was from the ghetto. This ninja knew how to move. Okay? All right. But my point being, Jesus' ears was to the ground. You know why his ears was to the ground? Because he was a humble dude. He's a humble dude. And there's functional humility, and then there's talk humility. There's pretend humility, where I can posture myself as if I'm humble. Real humility allows you to be close enough to the ground so you can hear everything that's going on. Everything that's going on. You're going to know everything that's going on because you humble. You're not into yourself. You're not all about you. You're not about getting as much as you could get. Just yesterday, I was talking to my neighbor. And she was talking about a family member who, when her husband died, basically made a claim that he killed her mom and dad. And she collected all the money from that. And it wasn't true. He didn't try to kill her mom and dad, but whatever. And this woman, she amassed a lot of money, and she would just keep all the money. Even her brothers and sisters, she just dragged all the money to herself. She's dead. She died last week of cancer. She lived a miserable life. And all that money and all those possessions, the things she was just kept on grabbing and grabbing and grabbing, didn't make her life any better. I say this to say this. Power was never made to be hoarded and to exalt one person. I'm going to go from scripture again. And again, these are nuggets. These are life lessons. Whether you believe in Jesus, you believe in God or not, these are nuggets. Okay? Hear what he said. I'm going to drop it on y'all again. See, we like to talk about how good we are. We don't like talking about our vulnerabilities. We do not like talking about how we slipped up and failed. Sometimes we can actually strengthen other people by our failures. Yeah, show somebody the pitfalls. Be able to break it down, but also to be able to let people know we're human just like everybody else. Just because I call myself a Christian doesn't mean I walk perfectly all the time. It's by Jesus' grace that I even walk. We're human beings, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not saying that I am proud of all my shortcomings. Absolutely not. They're shame to me. But when I bear my vulnerabilities to another person who needs the encouragement because they may be in a vulnerable time to themselves, it'll help them to know that their position is not unique. You understand? And then encourage them that they can come out of their situation. Back to what I was saying. Here it is. So Jesus said this. He said this. Oh. Yeah, here it is. Trying to find it. Yeah, here it is. Jesus said to them, I'm not teaching my own ideas. You did? I'm not teaching my ideas, but those of the Most High who sent me. Anyone who wants to do the will of the Most High will know whether my teaching is from him or merely my own. In other words, he's saying confirmation. The confirmation will come from people who know the Most High. They know that, and they could testify that what I'm saying ain't from me, but from the Most High. This is very important. This is a very important thing. We're breaking up, but that's all right. Hopefully we're breaking up. It's all right though. The point being, if it's all about me and drawing people to myself, what good is that? How is anybody benefiting from it? I'm benefiting, probably a little bit. Your power was made so you could reach more people, so you could help more people. It's not to be kept to yourself. Wealth, riches is not to be kept to myself. Yes, I need a certain amount of wealth and riches for me to sustain myself. I have to be able to sustain myself first before I can sustain anybody else. But once it flows out of you, it's to give other people. This is what kingdom building is about. This is what the kingdom is about. You understand what I'm saying? Anyways, so Jesus was saying, if this teaching and this stuff I'm talking here was all about me, then what good is it? It wouldn't have been good to you. It's from the Father. It's from the Most High. You understand? And a lot of people put in leadership positions misunderstand what their leadership position is about. You know? It's about the people, man. People come first. So if you look at how Zack Snyder runs his sets as a director, you realize he gives creative freedom to the actors. Come up with your own wardrobe. Come up with your own design. You know, I brought you in. You have your culture. Bring your culture into the thing. It's a collaborative process. He gives you freedom to do what you want to do. I'm going to go on a little further. I'm talking about Zack Snyder because I want y'all guys to realize human nature is what it is. We may have had thousands of years and millennia that passed, but human beings still behaved more or less the same way. No matter with the technology, whatever, we have tendencies and we behave the same way. Got a couple more. I told you I want to note these things. They wanted to kill him. They wanted to get rid of him. Right? Why did they want to get rid of him? Because they felt that he had broken one of their laws. It was about Shabbat. Jesus showed them how they contradict themselves, and yet they still wanted to kill him. They still wanted to keep him quiet because people were starting to believe. What did he do to Zack Snyder's career with Batman v Superman? They wanted to kill his career. They was trying to kill his career when it comes to comic book movies. The scathing pieces that they put up against him. We now know these are lies. They tried to kill his career. Why? Why? Because they felt he wasn't directing movies how they thought that comic book movies should be directed. How the MCU was conducting how movies was directed. You dig? Put our hit pieces on it. Literal hit pieces on it. Now we know that a lot of reviews on Rotten Tomato, the aggregator, are actually being influenced by companies. We have evidence of that. The thing about it is, it's more prevalent than people thought. That's all I'm going to say about that for now. I'm going to drop some more nuggets because we got to go through this first before we go into what we're going to talk about. Whether you believe in God or not, whether you believe in or persuaded with the line of reasoning I have or not, you got to acknowledge that history repeats itself. And some of these things being written in here are actually happening to real people and to real situations. We're talking about saving cinema. Trust me, trust me, trust me, trust me. This very relevant right now. Cause I didn't even get into Martin Scorsese yet. Right? Let's keep it moving. Jesus said certain things inside of the tabernacle, inside of the synagogue. People start believing. But then what does the leaders do? They say the people don't know what they say. When we look at the entertainment industry, fans be saying certain things. Fans be saying this guy's legit. Right? The audience starts saying it. Now it's spreading. Now more people are saying this guy's legit. This guy's more than meets the eye. What the entertainment industry been saying about this guy, we don't believe it no more. What do the heads say? They say the people don't know nothing, right? Let's go from the scripture again. I'm going to show you it's the same game being played over and over again. You got to ask yourself, are you part of this? Are you a contributor of this? Are you somebody who does that to other people too? Because human nature means human nature. Okay, then. Think about what I'm saying. Hear me out. When the security guard said, never a man spoke like this man, they said, have you been led astray too? This is the leaders, right? And they mocked them. They said, is there a single one of us rulers or Pharisees who believes in him? Do any of us, the gatekeepers, the people who run the industry, do we believe in this dude? We've been telling you what this dude is. You don't believe us? We the authorities on this. Okay, then. These ignorant crowds, they believe in him, but what do they know about it? It's a curse on them anyway. These ignorant fans, these toxic fans, they minorities, man. They just brand. They Snyder bros. You say something good about Tim Burton. Ah, Tim Burton, man, he was crap. Batman 1989 was crap. Nobody believed that. You a minority. You say something about Rotten Tomatoes. They're ready to discredit you. They're ready to kill that in the bud, even though they have no facts to back them up. Tim Burton got 8 to 9 Academy Awards. You telling me this dude's crap? He got more Academy Awards than Christopher Nolan. He got more hits. He got more cred in the Academy than Christopher Nolan. But y'all gonna tell me Tim Burton's not a good director? Please don't do that. Don't do that. We're gonna get back to this because I want to understand. There's a lot I want to say, but it's we don't got enough time. So let me get back to the point. Nicodemus, who's one of them? He's one of the leaders. One of the leaders who met with Jesus earlier. He stood up and said, "Is it legal to convict a man before he is given a hearing?" Yo, even one of them who didn't want to be seen in public with Jesus, but with back door he was doing this thing. He got up and defended him, and rightfully so, and legally so. But self-righteousness and people who feel they got power, sometimes they don't use the power appropriately, and so they dismissed him. And they said, "You from Galilee? You know any prophet that came out of Galilee?" That's how they chopped him down. He said, "Shut up. Stay with the program." All right. Now this, trust me, is extremely relevant to what I'm about to say. All right. Let's get into it. I didn't cover everything. I can't cover everything right now. There's a lot more I wanted to show in parallels, but I'm going to leave y'all guys to go read. Go read it. Why not? Bible ain't going to bite you. Go pick up a Bible, any Bible. Try to find one with modern English. It'll help you out. right? Don't go using the old King James term, thee dost die. And you have to be like Shakespearean. Thee dost die. If you like Shakespeare, then probably you use the old King James. King James has more meaning to it, it's more rich, okay? But having said that, shit, King James himself wasn't a good guy, okay? They named it after him, but he wasn't a cool dude. Anyways, that's another story for another day. Getting back to the point. Martin Scorsese. He shook the whole house. Martin old as hell. Martin's 80-something years old. Martin don't give a flying beep. So Martin gonna speak the truth. Okay, he gonna hit it unfiltered too. So here we go. Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese had a past statement he talked about concerning the MCU. All right, and I gotta go into it. You know what I mean? This is what Martin Scorsese said. Martin Scorsese on Marvel films. I don't see them. I tried, but that's not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't cinema. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. Man, when he said that, because there's so many people in the MCU and MCU fans and stuff, he got a lot of flack for that. He was hated on all kinds of stuff, right? Because what? He's talking directly to the people who enjoy that entertainment. He's talking directly to the people who wanted an endorsement, wanted to hear something positive, but instead he said what he said. When he said that, James Gunn, now head of DC, he responded. He said this. Here you go. I got my Twitter on it. He said, Martin Scorsese is one of my 5 favorite living filmmakers. I was outraged when people picketed The Last Temptation of Christ without having seen the film. I am saddened that he's now judging my films in the same way. And I'm not saying religious zealotry is the same as not liking my movies or in the same category. What I'm saying is I'm not fond of people judging things without actually seeing them, whether it's a movie about Jesus or a genre. That said, I will always love Scorsese, be grateful for his contribution to cinema, and can't wait to see The Irishman. Now, thing about it is, Martin Scorsese didn't say he didn't see any MCU films. I'm gonna read it back so you guys can see that Martin Scorsese is saying something. Look what he said. Martin Scorsese said this. He said, I don't see them, but I tried. Meaning, he went into the cinema and he watched one of the MCU films or a MCU film, but he didn't finish watching it. He didn't finish watching it to the end because he just couldn't take it. Okay? He was like, what is this? Right? Now, mind you, he's not an authority, or he is an authority on cinema because he kind of brought the cinematic experience to people with Taxi Driver and so on. But mind you, this new thing that the MCU brought about is a thing. People dug it. So you can't be like the scribes and Pharisees denying that it's not successful and very good at what it is. All that Martin Scorsese was saying is he doesn't see it as cinema. That's all he said. He said that's not cinema, right? Which is something that I say, which is something that you'll see a bunch of other people say. He's not saying that comic book movies are not cinema. He said the Marvel, the MCU movies, he tried to watch them, but he does not think of them as cinema. That's his point of view. Okay? And you'll hear his reasoning behind it. He is not the only one. Denis Villeneuve in 2021 said this: there are too many Marvel movies that are nothing more than a cut and paste of other Marvel movies. He said that. He said that. Denis Villeneuve, the guy who's doing Dune right now and Dune 2. Zack Snyder, he said this about Martin Scorsese's claims. He said he is okay with Martin Scorsese slamming superhero films. I'm certain he wasn't talking about my movies, Snyder said with a laugh. He said this: in fact, it's a fair point, Zack Snyder said in response to a fan question in his interview about Martin Scorsese saying that he doesn't find these things a cinema. Martin Scorsese is a genius. If you're really good at something, commenting on that world is completely within your rights. It doesn't diminish my respect for him. I'm certain he wasn't talking about my movies. He might have been, but I like to think he wasn't. He meant the other ones. Oh my God. I would say this. Martin Scorsese said this because he was coming actually from a place of reasoning. And we will speak about that in a minute. But I also have another impactful MCU director, Joss Whedon, who said, when Martin Scorsese said, it isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. When Martin Scorsese said that, Joss Whedon took issue to that. And he said, I first of all think of James Gunn and how his heart and guts are packed into Guardians of the Galaxy. I reverend Marty. I do see his point, but, well, there's a reason why I'm always angry. So he was angry that Martin Scorsese said that. So Martin Scorsese got a lot of flack from Marvel fans. He got a lot of flack from comic book fans. In fact, the people took it to the extent where they didn't just go with MCU. They said Martin Scorsese was saying this about all comic book movies. Hold on one second. Pause. Just excuse me for a second. All right. So that caused a lot of uproar back in 2019. We used to say that the Marvel movies are formulaic. They seem to follow a formula. And now I'm going to provide evidence of that. Okay? Dennis Villeneuve was right. They do seem like a copy and paste of each other. A lot of them. They have similar beats. I'm going to first go into what Martin Scorsese recently said. And again, not being a gatekeeper, but I'm showing you information so that you can understand why all this attack on auteur, we have a lot of auteur directors who are being attacked of recent times. We have a lot of really reputable people who built a reputation who are being attacked now. I'm going to explain to you why that's so and how that's very similar to the scribes and Pharisees who were, you're going to have to excuse me, there's a background noise, it's very disturbing. So we'll just wait for a minute. I don't really like that they're advertising, you're hearing the advertising on my stream, but it's extremely loud. I'll take a moment to eat though. So, sorry about that, but good opportunity to eat something. So I'm going to talk about his recent statements on cinema and on these movies. And I'm trying to show you something. We must not be like the scribes and Pharisees, as if we're authority on something and we're willing to victimize and attack people without facts. Okay? Now, if you're coming from a factual basis, you got to also look at paradigm changes. What makes a movie good, etc. Can I say that Marvel movies are good? Yes, people go to see it. If they go to see it, it's good. Not necessarily my taste in movies. Okay? For me, they're trash. That's how I feel about it. But for people who go see them, it's good. Okay? So I can't objectively say that they're trash. I wouldn't do that. I understand a whole bunch of people go to see those movies. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, they have to be good. Because people enjoy them. And they pay to see them. So they have to be good. Barbie, I don't agree with its philosophy. But it has to be good. People went and saw it. People enjoyed it. It has to be good. Okay? The people determine it. Not the critics. Not the gurus. Maybe some critics who align with my taste in movies, because why are you going to look at a critical reception? You look at a critical reception to see if it's a movie you would want to see, right? So if you're thinking about it that way, then you have to go find the actual reviews and look for the critics that taste line up with yours. For example, if a critic is saying this is the greatest movie in the world, you go into cinema and you find it's a terrible movie, then it means that critic and your taste don't match. Right? Okay. That's why aggregators like Rotten Tomatoes, it's a waste of time. Okay? All right. So moving back on. Martin Scorsese, recent statements on cinema. Let's go into it. So in his GQ interview, Martin Scorsese, oh boy, I want to eat, but I'm going to not do that. I'm not going to eat and talk. Martin Scorsese was talking about his evolution as a director. He was talking about his perception of the world, how things have changed, how he stripped off a lot of stuff from himself. But we're going to focus on the industry. So the interviewer got to him and said, what do you think changed with the industry that a filmmaker as talented and dedicated as you just can't make the films that they want? So Scorsese said this, well, the industry is over. In other words, the industry that I was a part of We're talking almost like what, 50 years ago? It's over. It's like saying to somebody in 1970 who made silent films, what do you think happened? Silent films was long gone since probably the 50s. But of course, Scorsese has theories. Here's his theory. Studios, he said, are not interested any longer in supporting individual voices that express their personal feelings or their personal thoughts or their personal ideas and feelings on a big budget. And what's happened now is that they've pigeonholed it to what they call independent films. So if you're trying to tell something unique from your perspective as a director, what we call director-driven films or a singular vision, studios are moving away from that. Scorsese is often cast as a retrograde defender of things that used to be, in part because of his work with the Film Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization he helped fund, which has since preserved and restored hundreds of films, old films. But it is not exactly that simple. He believes that movie theaters are not dying. I think there will always be a theatrical experience because people want to experience things together. But at the same time, the theaters have to step up to make them places where people will want to go and enjoy themselves or will want to go and see something that moves them. Moves them. There's nothing wrong with a fun popcorn flick, for example. There's nothing wrong with that. But there should also be the opportunity, and this is what I love about this guy, for someone to go and see something that moves them, something that is transformative. When you leave the cinema considering what you saw on the screen and how it changes your perspective on how things are conducted in the world and informs you how you should approach it. It's not necessarily something that tells you what to do, but it gives you insight. It gives you an understanding. Here I suggested to Scorsese that the movie theaters should show only films that Hollywood actually made. I don't know if that's a great idea because there's a decentralization of movie making now. We have Bollywood, we have that place in Atlanta, we have independent films, we have independent Christian films, we have independent filmmaking companies. So I don't know how, relevant that will be anymore. But nonetheless, this is what the interviewer was saying. He said, here I suggested, the GQ guy, here I suggested that Hollywood only make the films. And therein lies the problem. That if Hollywood makes nothing but comic book and franchise movies, like, Mission Impossible, like, Fast and Furious, like, all those franchise movies, right? James Bond and, these big budget franchise films, comic book movies, connected universes, that kind of thing. Certain segments of the audience don't want to see those films. Then nothing is going to get them to go to the movie theater. Those people who don't want to see those films. That makes sense. You kind of leave out those people, so those people just don't go to the theater anymore. Which is what we're seeing with DC. I feel bad about having done this, since Scorsese's skeptical comments about Marvel and comic book films in the past have attracted a lot of vitriol, and here I am inviting more vitriol for Martin Scorsese. Please complain to me and not to him. This is the GQ guy who I don't even know what his name is. But he does see trouble in the glut of franchise and comic book entertainment that currently makes up much of what you see in the theater. He said this about that, because it's the majority of things you see in the theater now are James Bond movies, Mission Impossible. These big budget films are usually franchise films, right? Scorsese says this, the danger there is what it's doing to a culture. Because there are going to be generations now that think movies are only those. That's what movies are. These big budget franchise things. And he's right. In fact, the GQ guy says, I think people already think that. And he said, they already think that, which means we have to fight back stronger. It's got to come from the grassroots level. It's got to come from the filmmakers themselves. And you'll have, the Safdie brothers, and you have Christopher Nolan, you know what I mean? And hit them from all sides. Hit them from all sides. Don't give up. Let's see what you got. Go out there and do it. Go reinvent. Don't complain about it. But it's true, because we have got to save cinema. Cinema could be anything. Scorsese said it didn't just have to be serious. Some like it hot. That's cinema, for example. But I do think that the manufactured content isn't really cinema. Bam. That's what Scorsese was saying. Okay, but I'm going to keep it moving, because like I said, this is a lengthy video. We're already an hour and 4 minutes in. It's a slow burn. So if you don't like slow burns, you can go. The GQ guy says, again, you don't need to say this. He says, no, I don't want to say it. But what I mean is that it's manufactured content. It's almost like AI making film. And that doesn't mean that you don't have incredible directors and special effects people doing beautiful artwork. But what it does mean, what does it mean? What do these films mean? What will they give you? You. Aside from a kind of consuming of something and then eliminating it from your mind, from your whole body, what is it giving to you? Ask yourself that question. You were entertained. You enjoyed yourself. Yeah, this superhero did this and this superhero did that. Yeah, it was a great time. But at the end of the day, what did you get other than fun? Scorsese's sorry, my bad. He is not a Luddite or a technophobe. He is excited about Avatar: The Way of Water, about 3D, about IMAX, about formal and technical experimentation as anyone else. I'm looking forward to new ways, he said. It's just, I got as far as this. And that's what I do. That's it. And if I could just muster up the energy, God willing, to make a couple more movies, one more maybe, and that's it, that's okay. That's as far as I got. You keep going until you can't. But what I mean is, you gotta rip it out from your skull and your guts to find out what the hell you really feel you should say at this point in your life. By you. You gotta say something with a movie. Otherwise, what's the point of making it? You got to say something. Does Scorsese see his influence in contemporary films he watches now? He said, yeah, I see some camera moves, but I usually see story and atmosphere. Definitely, there's that influence in a lot of stuff. I've seen some that were so much that I just stopped watching them. Not that I look at a film to learn something, but in effect, I'm not going to learn anything. But sometimes I learn something. But in the process of watching something, you might come away from it enlightened. I can't put it into words, but you're enlightened in another way. Zack Snyder would say it this way. If you want to be a director, you have to tell your story as only you can tell it. Is Martin Scorsese wrong? I'm going to show you all something. Remember what the scripture was. Jesus was bringing something. He was speaking with authority and he was speaking truth. And they tried to muzzle him for it. They tried to muzzle him for it. One man versus a whole system. They eventually killed him. But what he said was so astonishing that it brought about controversy. Sort of like what Martin Scorsese does. Sort of like what Zack Snyder does. Sort of like what Tim Burton does. Listen to me, Denis Villeneuve does. Author directors. Why? They have strong opinions about things because they live it and because they understand they serve a craft. Meaning, they don't see themselves at the center of everything. They see the story as the center of everything. They serve the story. All right. I'm going to show you one more thing. This post was done May 17th of 2022. Titled, it's from The Direct, titled, Why Marvel Takes Away Control from MCU Directors, according to Joe Russo. Let's go. You can find the article on Google. Why Marvel takes away control from MCU directors, according to Joe Russo. I told you I was going to go in deep. By Klein Felt. Making any movie is anything but easy, but that difficulty seems to ramp up tenfold when working on something within the MCU. Not only are creators faced with the immense pressure to deliver something worthy of the storied franchise, but for the most part, they have to deal with the intervention of Marvel in furthering the greater story. All right? Good. That moves us to here. Remember what Martin Scorsese said about manufactured content. I'm not saying that the approach was not effective. The question is Marvel manufacturing content? This has resulted in many amazing collaborative experiences among the directors, writers, and Marvel studio producers, but it does not always go so swimmingly. The biggest name in Hollywood has developed somewhat of a reputation of meddling with directors' visions on projects and being difficult to work with if a filmmaker does not see eye to eye with the studio president, Kevin Feige and company. Pause. Let me eat something. You guys digest that for a second, because I'm not finished. I'm just getting started. I'll say this. These big conglomerates don't like people having their own ideas, because these conglomerates have their own ideas about how things should be done. And Warner Brothers Pictures took pride once in being a director-driven studio. But the director was the person hired, and then from there carried out his particular vision for how a movie should be. And then the studio would distribute. The MCU did not operate like that. The MCU was a corporate, specialized group of executives who oversaw young directors. Usually they weren't, they were early in their careers, and shaped the vision how they, the corporate committee, wanted it to go. This was led under Kevin Feige. It was a totally different approach. Revolutionary in the sense for companies and corporations that they could actually be profitable doing this, but supposedly lowering the risk. But was it duplicatable? So DC is trying to do that. He's now trying to DC under Warner Brothers Pictures. I just bit into a stone. Damn thing's still in there. Interesting. DC's trying to duplicate that. They're trying to duplicate Marvel's success. Okay? Marvel's struggling. They're struggling right now. Okay. So let's keep it going. Just want to crunch on something before I continue onwards, because this is quite lengthy. What the hell? What the fuck? A second stone. I just bit a second stone. What the hell? I never get stone in my food. So crazy. Okay. I told you I'm not a perfect person. All right. It's this reputation that had yielded solutions like Edgar Wright leaving Ant-Man, Scott Derrickson parting ways on Multiverse of Madness, and rumors of troubled productions on projects like Eternals. Is all this hate warranted? One of the MCU's biggest directors ever has come forward explaining where the friction may originate. Joe Russo on the MCU dilemma. Speaking with Empire, MCU director Joe Russo of the Russo brothers broke down where some friction may come from between Marvel Studios and its creatives. Russo said that he's seen some issues when a cut of any particular project is delivered to Marvel Studios and it's not what they're expecting, nor it's working. This results in Marvel stepping in and taking over some control from its directors, working with them in a much heavier way to develop fixes before going into weeks and weeks of reshoots. Where I've seen issues is when a director's cut gets delivered and it's not what they're expecting, or it's not working. When Marvel turns it on and they come in and start to work with the filmmaker in a much heavier way to develop the fixes for the movie and then go into extensive reshoots. The Marvel vet also brought up his experience working with Marvel Studios and the collaboration that it requires. He reminisced about Marvel exec Kevin Feige hanging around with the Russos and his brother, pitching on what you're working on. So they were pitching what they were working on. It was this collaborative process with Marvel that helped the Russo brothers and their teams in a disciplined process of developing screenplays. Remember, they were rookies, right? So Kevin Feige was overwatching them hard. He was micromanaging them. That's what he basically was saying. And so we had a fantastic time working with them because we had a great level of control. Again, we're not afraid of collaboration. So all Kevin ultimately cares about is, can he come in a room with you and hang out? He's amazing at pitches and will pitch on what you're working on. So he would pitch or suggest an idea while they're working on something. He's amazing at pitches and like pitch on what you're working on. So you had us and my brother Marcus, McFeely, and Kevin, and they would come in every 2 or 3 weeks, and he would just sit for a day and we talk where we're at, because we have been very disciplined in a process of developing screenplays. And we'd start with 3-page outline, and that would take months because we would all argue about what the story is. And then when Kevin came in, he'd argue about it with us, and then we'd throw out ideas. And then Nate Moore, who's a huge collaborator and an executive at Marvel, would come in. And then we'd go into a 10, 12, 20-page outline, and we do the same thing. It's then after this outline is developed and filming actually starts that the Russos say Marvel gets hands off until the director presents the first cut. And then when you go off to make the movie, they're very hands off, and it's your bed to make in a lot of ways. Marvel really sort of where these famous stories come from about people putting in sidelines or being put on the sidelines or them coming in post. It's really about how you deliver your director's cut. The director gets a cut, then the producer comes in, and the producer becomes a part of the process with you. The Avengers Endgame co-director made it clear that though their process did look a little different as they reshoot while they're shooting, so the director cuts are rarely comprehensive and rarely polished. But part of our process, Anthony and I, was that we tend to reshoot while we're shooting, because we'll go into editorial at night and we're exhausted, we're sleeping 3 hours a night, but we're watching what we're shooting and we're assessing it. And then there's a problem, we're fixing it the next day before we tear the set down. We go get a close-up and then we rewrite the end of a scene with Marcus and McFreely. Whatever it is, we address it so that our director's cuts are really comprehensive and really polished. And that's really the process at Marvel. So, basically, this is what DC is doing now. James Gunn comes in, he changes up certain things, starts giving notes. You can talk about passing of notes by executives to creatives. So really, like the Russos said, they didn't really direct their film. They directed their film in name, but they were part of a committee. These are movies made by a committee. They're not singular director-driven films. So the reason, and now obviously DC's doing the same, they've been working with Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns been overseeing, Jeff Johns be on the sets. Now James Gunn has taken over the mantle of the head guy, but Jeff Johns is still there. Joss Whedon's still there. They're all still there, ladies and gentlemen, giving people. That's why you get that sort of, you're not getting the movie you're looking for. It doesn't seem to have any personality. It seems kind of generic. They all do the same joke beats. They always have a joke inserted here and there. It's because these guys are still there and they're still working on these movies. The same joke we saw, a variation of the same joke from Justice League 2017 with the lasso of truth, is the same joke we see in The Flash. The same joke that we saw in what's the name of the thing? The way how even the wording and even the writing, how it's coming out, is because you're getting a repeat of the same people involved. You've got producers, you've got executives who are interfering with the creatives and the creative process, and changing how the creatives approach things. Whereas with Zack Snyder, he gives the creatives power to do whatever certain things with their character, to own their character, to possess their character. It was a collaborative process still, but it had a singular director's vision. Whereas you've got multiple visions being put into one, compressed into one, and a bunch of people agreeing on a certain direction. This is what happened with Black Adam. I'm guessing this is what happens with Aquaman. This is what's going to happen with Aquaman 2. And these flaming, like flagrantly flamboyant colors, like ridiculous bright colors, the executives are all agreeing on this. That's why I said there's an executive involvement in filmmaking where the creatives are the ones who's supposed to be involved in the filmmaking. And this is the problem we are facing. And this is what Mr. Scorsese is speaking about, and Dennis Villeneuve. The movies feel like a cut and paste of each other. They feel formulaic, and James Gunn is talking. He's just talking about how, Marvel's going to do, DC's going to do unique things. The films are too much like each other. Yeah, but how are you going to change it if you're coming in with the same system from the MCU, which makes these kinds of movies? And I do agree with Martin Scorsese that these movies feel like they're from a factory. They feel like they're manufactured. They feel very commercial. And they even feel cheap. And they don't feel like movies. And it's because there's all these executives, all these business people and stuff saying, hey, you need to insert a jerk here. You need to insert. So it surface level entertains, but no deeper. And then on top of that, let me say this. They can use AI to entertain if that's the way it's going. Then you could just use an AI machine to create scenarios and do your writing, But AI cannot do elaborate, multi-layered, complex movies because that comes from a singular vision. So Dennis Villeneuve, he's correct. And Jesus, just like that, he would have seemingly no formal training of how a movie should be. The critics and all these people who've been bought talking about how a movie should be and its structure, and they're so rigid on it. They're basing it off of the MCU and how the MCU does beats. But they were paid to play corruption. And Jesus exposed the corruption of the scribes and Pharisees, which is why they so much wanted to kill him, because they can't bamboozle the masses with their propaganda anymore. Very much like how the CIA-led Hollywood is trying to bamboozle people with propaganda. By the way, Martin Scorsese is not an insider in Hollywood. You know what I mean? He's not one of those guys either. He's on the outside. Tim Burton's been kicked out. In fact, I think Netflix recently removed a lot of his movies from off their Netflix playlist. They're blacklisting Tim Burton for some reason. I don't know why. He probably doesn't want to play ball. I don't know. Guys like Tim Burton, Dennis Villeneuve, Ridley Scott, all of these auteur directors are being sidelined by Hollywood. And why? Because these directors were giving, they weren't into the propaganda machine. They were into the human experience. They were speaking from a human perspective. This is why Martin Scorsese said it, and he's so correct. These movies are not about the human experience anymore. They have superficial pathos. They have superficial scenarios, but they're really just comedies. Most of them are just comedies. And if they're a little bit more serious than a comedy, they say, oh, there's a serious movie. And there are people growing up on these movies thinking that's cinema. And I'm not here to tell you what is cinema and what is not cinema. But from my personal perspective, because cinema, art is a subjective thing. That is not cinema. That is my personal perspective. I'm not authority on it, so I'm not going to say that's not cinema. Nah, a guy like Martin Scorsese could say that because he's been doing it. He's an authority on the thing. But even so, I give the leeway. I say it's successful. It's doing its thing. It's something new. Cool. But the question is, there are some people who enjoy that. If you do not know what your audience is, you are going to alienate the people who are not interested in that and want something else. And this is where DC and the DCEU has been going wrong. They feel they're authorities on things. They're listening to certain authorities on this, but they have a rigid way of looking at things. And because of that, things sneak underneath their radar. Zack Snyder was able to do Zack Snyder's Justice League under their radar because they were so pompous and full-headed in, oh, this is the way how it must be done. And they believe James Gunn is going to get it for them. But I'm saying your audience is not receptive to that. And in fact, the so-called superhero fatigue is because some of the people are realizing that these flaky movies were just that. They were flaky movies. Flaky constructs. They weren't real. Somebody pulled up a fast one on them. People are now realizing that. And I've been looking on Twitter recently, and how people really started to vibe with what Martin Scorsese was saying. But most of these people are not even comic book movie fans, to be honest with you, right? Because the comic book movie world has taken over everything. It's only Avatar that kind of knocked it down a little bit. And then Mission Impossible knocked it down. But again, Avatar, Mission Impossible are franchise films. What happened to the films about everyday life, about the everyday human experience, about factual things that happened in history? Oppenheimer was the only movie that stood up to that. Right? There was nothing necessarily fictional about Oppenheimer. You get what I'm saying? You know, movies about things that's happening in our world, not no superpower, nothing, so some sort of glamorized spy novel or some kind of Fast and Furious thing. No, we're talking now about, that was popcorn flicks. Things that literally deal with our world, something that makes us look at our world, make us feel something for people in our world. You're not seeing a lot of those movies as blockbusters. You know, the last one I think was Oppenheimer. All right. And Nolan fell out with Dennis Villeneuve. Now let me just say this so that it's clear. Martin Scorsese is not talking about comic book movies are not cinema. He never said that. He never said that. All right. He's talking about where studios have now taken over the creative process. Period. They've kidnapped it from artists. Artists are now doing what they tell them to do. Period. That's what's happening. People who are not filmmakers in any way, shape, or form, they're just producers, are now making films. That's what's happening. And he's right. He's 100% correct. I'm not judging anybody, but that's what's happening. Directors are directors only in name. And this is what's happening with DC. This is what's happening with Marvel. But I want to show you guys a couple other things because, you know, we're now an hour and 30 minutes in. I want to show you guys a couple other things. So WB's direction is that direction, but is it a fruitful direction? Will it work? More than likely not, because people are tired with that. People have come to a realization. People are waking up. There was a time when people's concept of comic book movies, by the way, you can smash the like button. I see you guys still watching this, and I don't know why you're watching this, and you won't reward me with smashing the like button. At least smash the like button. Be nice now. Be nice. Smash the like button. If you're watching the video, you're listening to my content, at least smash the like button. Be kind. You know, I'm just saying. All right, anyway, so there are people who, you know, think that this is all comic book movies. This is not all comic book movies, okay? And I have here, actually, let me hold on a second. I want to show you guys a lot of comic book movies that that are not committee-led stuff. And actually, DC only started doing this very recent. Well, actually, they've been doing it time and time again. I'm gonna show you what I'm talking about. So the first one was Superman by Richard Donner. By the second movie, the studio had taken over the movie, kicked out Richard Donner because he wasn't doing what they thought he was supposed to do, and they put in Superman 2 was done by Richard, what's his name? Richard Lester. Even though Richard Donner had shot principal photography, Richard Lester. I'm going to go to Marvel too, so don't get it twisted. We're going to do both of them. But I want to show you before I get that. So Superman 3, Superman 4, corporate structure took over. Batman and Batman Returns, that was Tim Burton, and then they took over, and corporate structure took over and made Schumacher do a movie they wanted. So they got Batman Forever, and then they got Batman and Robin. Okay, and they always go into these flamboyant colors. I don't know what's wrong with these people. They always think comic book movies is these flamboyant colored people, whatever. I guess from the Real American Hero. If you ever seen Real American Hero, go check it out. The Greatest American Hero. Sorry, it's a TV show with a guy with flamboyant colors, guy from the Alien, whatever. They decided we're gonna try and do that, or we're gonna try and do the Batman and Robin from the 1960s, whatever. It don't work. You know why? Because you're forcing it on people. If you had organically allowed it to flow like Real American Hero or like what happened with Batman and Robin, it will work. And you have a singular vision, sort of like. Anyway, going back to it. So Nolan did his Batman trilogy. That was okay. We had corporate structure and Superman Returns that were wrecked up. The X-Men, a great director like X-Men, Bryan Singer. How on earth could Bryan Singer go wrong with Superman? Because corporate structure, Jeff Johns, all those guys messed it up. And then we didn't have any corporate interference except for Green Lantern, which was a corporate film. Jonah Hex backfired. That was the director's fault. But the studio did change up things at last minute. Again, Martin Scorsese talks about this. Sometimes the director has this thing all set out and everything, and then the studio comes in and just messes up the guy's movie at the last moment. I don't know. They keep on doing it over and over again. You wonder, what is wrong with these studios? You repeat the same mistakes over and over. Don't you learn? I guess corporately they're stupid. The Dark Knight Rises, that was good. Man of Steel was good. Nobody affected that. Batman v Superman, they came in last minute, cut the wrong time, messed up the guy's movie, right? Then they dabble up in Suicide Squad. To this day, David Ayer hasn't even put his vision on the screen. This is supposed to be, again, DC is supposed to be director-led studio. That's what they took pride in. Apparently not. But then Jeff Johns was there, and Jeff Johns was trying to follow what Kevin Feige was doing, and he was just, I mean, I want to cuss, but I can't cuss. He was screwing over people and screwing over their movies, right? We don't need to go down the list. But we know after Justice League, it was all downhill from there, right? They interfered with every single movie except for Joker and even the Batman. I'm sure Matt Reeves, even though he had some sort of contract and stuff, I think they still messed with it a little bit. And that's sad because Matt Reeves, I'm sure he would have wanted to do a Batman where he was killing people and so on. Because you could see it was gritty and everything, and then it wasn't rated R for some reason. And for some reason, Batman, you know, they did the so-called Batman purists were saying Batman doesn't kill in this movie, but he does. He did kill in that movie. Yeah, and everything else has just been garbage, right? And it's basically been the MCU formula, like you guys said, where executives have been tampering in these films over and over again. Now, you've heard this story before, so this is not surprising. But here's the part that you probably didn't hear. The part you don't understand is that at Marvel, they're trying to get more grittier movies. In fact, Kevin Feige, Moon Knight is supposed to be grittier. More people are supposed to die. It's supposed to be more graphic. They're trying to get the MCU. See, the weird thing about this whole thing was this, right? When Zack Snyder came on the scene, he kind of revolutionized everything because Marvel was doing that thing. It was on a good little tear and stuff. Now people were starting to believe this is what comic book movies should look like. And then Zack Snyder came in with Man of Steel. Yeah, the critics trashed this movie, but it gave such enlightenment. Like, it was so enlightening. It changed everything. And then when Zack came with Batman v Superman, which they said Zack shouldn't do Batman v Superman, but Zack Snyder himself said this was the next progressive step. And he had even left Easter eggs pointing out that it would be Batman v Superman would be next. So when Zack came up with the idea of Batman v Superman, again, they were just trash talking ideas, and then they came up with it. That blew the roof over everything because, as you know, Marvel changed their game and they went with Civil War, right? They bashed Zack's Batman v Superman. To this day, they're bashing it. But here's the thing. It was a game changer. That never happened with Marvel. They game changed with Avengers, but that's about it. They never game changed after that. Zack has game changed every single time. Every time Zack puts out a DC movie, it game changes. It brings controversy, just like how Jesus brought controversy, just like how Tim Burton brought controversy. But the singular direction is so good that there's rewatchability. You can't stop watching that stuff. You know, you can go back right now and watch Man of Steel, and you could watch it a couple times, right? It's because the singular vision trumps any sort of corporate vision. Any. It's just different because art is a subjective thing. Art is from the perspective of an individual giving it to other people. Even if it's a collective, like a choir giving it to other people, somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to have their singular vision for that choir. It cannot just be going in multiple directions and just a collaborative process. It has to be singular vision. And every movie is its own organism. So, let's talk about some DC movies. First of all, besides the DC movies you've heard about that have had singular vision and have done very, very well, in fact, won Academy Awards. So we all know about the Dark Knight trilogy, particularly the Dark Knight. We know about Zack Snyder stuff, so I'll skip that. We haven't had another singular movie in a long time. But even before that, we had Constantine. We had V for Vendetta. And then you go back and you watch Constantine. If you go back and watch V for Vendetta, the staying power on these things are just so crazy. These are all under DC, okay? Staying power of these things are crazy. The staying power of corporate films, they don't have much staying power because they're commercialized. All right. You got a Road to Perdition. You can go watch that right now. That's a DC film as well. It really comes from Paradox Press, but nonetheless, Road to Perdition is a comic book and still stands the test of time. Since 2002, this came out. A History of Violence that came out in 2005. It feels like a grounded film. Both films are grounded films because they kind of, one's a period film, one's a more modern film, but they both stand the test of time. Okay? The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I love it. I mean, it was a flop, but I love it. Great, kind of mythical, the Invisible Man, the Dracula, the different people that were in it. It's fantastic. And it's from a comic book. And then you have Red and Red 2. Those also did very well. What I'm trying to say is that singular visions generally trump anything else you can do. And usually the director with a singular vision always goes at loggerheads with the studio because the studio never understands. Abdi and DeLuca has a lot of experience in this. So they're the ones that really, they should have been running DC. I'm going to be honest with you. You should have been running DC. Right now, DC is in the wrong hands. They're trying something, experiment with something, but it's not going to work because it's a different audience. So I think that restoring the Snyderverse and Zack Snyder's Justice League in IMAX is a very good thing to have. I think these so-called gurus and authorities in cinema who want to say what cinema is and isn't. I mean, let's be real. Scorsese says that these manufactured films are not cinema. Just like AI films are not cinema. That's what he said. But he has a lot of experience and he makes movies, right? I wouldn't go as far as to say whether they are or aren't. I don't make movies, okay? But I do say he has a point. And I do believe that what I know as cinema, from my perspective, so I'm not going to definitively say this or that, but from my perspective, from my subjective perspective, I don't see them as cinema. Okay? I told people Infinity War, I hated it. In fact, I decided to watch it because people were talking about it. I went and saw it and I hated it. Okay? I never watched Endgame. Okay? Scorsese probably started to watch one of the Marvel films and probably was disgusted with it and he never finished watching it. And he just decided, I'm not watching any of those films. My point being that me, subjectively, in terms of my taste of movies, that to me is not cinema. So what is cinema to me? And then what is cinema, period? Cinema, period, is anything. It can be anything that's put up on the big screen. Okay? To me, cinema that I grew up with was on film, and cinema in some way commented on our human experience. And to me, from what I've seen, even the funny cinema is transformative. It's always about something you can add to your life, something to make you reflect on. No matter what, it could be funny, whatever. It comes from a perspective because it comes from a perspective. It doesn't come from a corporate's perspective, which plays safe with things and glamorizes things and has you, and it's very superficial. No, cinema to me always had something. It always had something to say. Again, this is my subjective view of cinema from my perspective and my experiences with cinema. Different people may have other experiences with cinema and they may have other things with cinema. Okay? Mine. So please do not say that I am definitively saying what cinema is. Now, Martin Scorsese, he been doing cinema his whole life. So if he decides to say what cinema is or what it is not, then I cannot argue with him. And he does have a sound point, and I do agree with all the points he's made. But me, I can't speak like that because I'm not a creative who makes films. So I wouldn't reserve that judgment for somebody who has actually made films and actually done it. Okay? The scribes and Pharisees did not make humanity. Jesus did. So when he spoke in power and authority beyond what the scribes and Pharisees even were taught. And therefore, he was able to, as an authority on the thing, the real authority, speak. Okay? Scorsese's done it. He made movies. James Gunn decided to reply to him. James Gunn made a movie. Okay? Joss Whedon made a movie. You understand what I'm saying? They make movies. Right? But make no mistake. Scorsese has a point. Right? Now, was it effective what James Gunn did? What Joss Whedon did? What Kevin Feige did? Absolutely. People went in the cinema, saw the stuff. They made tons of money. They did well. Okay? We're not going to talk about all the sabotage and all the other things that went along with it. They made their money. It was effective. Is it something for DC? No. The audience rejects that. The audience that came to see the Snyderverse was a group of people who was finished with comic book movies. They had seen comic book movies, they've been enthralled by it, and they said, all right, but you know, it's still, I like life and I like dealing with literal things. I want something to worth my money to go in the cinema and see. That's the kind of people that you're dealing with when you talk about DC movies. That's why Road to Perdition won Academy Award and was viewed and it made money. That's why Constantine made money. Whereas Superman Returns flopped. Whereas Green Lantern flopped because people didn't connect with those movies. These people didn't see the relevance of these movies. They were too safe, too what people think comic book movies are for. They think it's for kids. You know, the perception of comic book movies is unrealistic. That it's an unrealistic thing, but it's a fantasy, but kids can relate to it. So I'll go just for my kids. But me, at my own, I wouldn't go and watch a comic book movie. This was the perception of it. And then Marvel, the MCU, made it a reality where they were doing these, and they talked about it being so grounded and everything, but that was just spin. The truth be told, these movies are the most unrealistic movies you'll ever find, because in real life, people don't behave like that. The world wouldn't just accept things just like that. The world wouldn't, in this world where you have social media, you see how people are with their leaders. So it was very unrealistic what was going on in the Avengers movie and several other movies where people were just, the whole place was a catastrophe and people taking it up the butt, and it was just playing along with the Avengers and just agreeing with everything and going into safe places. And even when they did the Lashback movie with Civil War, again, just retarded, and Age of Ultron. People aren't trying to, people of the world are not mounting an army to take down the Avengers and all of this stuff. The people would be like, this is whack. In the real world, in social media, the Avengers would be public enemy number one. It doesn't matter what decree or what United Nations decree they are. People are skeptical of the United Nations, for starters. I mean, come on now. All right. So it was unrealistic in many, many ways. And it's just, they were able to pull it off, and good for them. But I'll be real with you guys. Ain't nobody saying that Road to Perdition is an unrealistic movie. Ain't nobody saying that and Constantine was a real occultic movie, right? But it felt like it was real. It was into the occult and a lot of occultic crap. V for Vendetta, which was sort of unrealistic, but it was grounded. There was no superheroes or anything. So because it was grounded like that, it was unrealistic though. But even if it was grounded like that, people bought into it. You see what I'm saying? The Matrix, which was very unrealistic, was grounded. So people bought into it. And because it was serious, they weren't clowning with the, throwing any, snide remarks and jokes every 2 seconds. It was able to do what it did. The Losers, The Kitchen, which was the Kitchen was a comedy, sort of comedy slash. But again, it's not. Nobody has superpowers. Nobody's doing. It's a grounded movie, even though it's a comedy. You got to understand that singular visions matter when you're doing art. You could have collaborative processes where everybody puts their little touch into art and you get this big, nice, big art thing. But when it's corporate interest, where you're forcing things to fit, you force a joke in here, you force this here, you feel how it's manufactured, you feel how artificial it is. A collaboration that's organic is different to a collaboration that's forced. And you can feel the forced jokes inside of there. It's just so repugnant, okay? Because it, instead of being funny to you, it's like a slap in the face. Like, you think I'm an idiot? I know this is something you just forced in there. And I do believe that trying to make things in the image and likeness of yourself or what you want, the selfish approach, is what kills things. And that's what killed the Batman franchise. That's what killed the Green Lantern film, because you had selfish people in there trying to impose their ideas and views on something, forcing the creators to make this happen instead of allowing the creators to be creative, giving them the space to be creative, allowing them to make the mistakes. They like to take the responsibility for losing money or anything, but letting them be, letting them flow. And this is the problem that has happened with DC, and DC is going to fall if they do not go with the directorial approach to things. Leave the executive out of the creative process. Let them be involved in the funding and so on. Nurture the people to do what they need to do. Maybe put them around people who know what they're doing and have done it all the time. I mean, I'm talking about not non-creators, but creators. James Gunn is a creative, but he has a certain approach to things. Any creative will tell you, I can't tell another creative how to do things because they may do things differently to I. So Christopher Nolan was hands off of Zack Snyder. Whatever Zack Snyder wanted to do, he could do. He would respect it. Yes, they argued and disputed and hashed out how the thing would be, but at the end of the day, he gave Zack Snyder the freedom to do what he wanted to do. Zack Snyder did the same thing with Patty Jenkins. Patty Jenkins could go whatever direction she wanted to go. He was not hands-on with that. He was working on his other movie. The point being, you have to free up people to get the best out of them. Let them take responsibility for what they're doing. Let them take ownership of what they're doing. And that's what allows people to blossom and shine. And if they do the same with their creatives under them, it goes better than you trying to force people, bottlenose people into a way of how you do things. It doesn't work for DC. I can tell you that. It'll work for Marvel, but it ain't gonna work for DC. So, since there is no better alternative out there right now, we have Matt Reeves, who is doing his Batman series, and that's all he wants to do. And then we have Todd Phillips. He's doing a sequel to Joker, which should never have had a sequel, and therefore I don't think the sequel is going to be as good as the original, because I do think the studio put in more money, and I do think if they have a chance, they're going to tamper with Todd Phillips stuff, unless Abdi and DeLuca are hands off. If Abdi and DeLuca are hands off, and Todd Phillips is under Abdi and DeLuca, and Matt Reeves is under Abdi and DeLuca, even though they're under DC and therefore under James Gunn and Peter Safran, well then, we're in for a good time, because that's what it needs to be done. All of those creators, like I said, Kathy Ann, Patty Jenkins, even James Wan, all of these creators, they've had to conform to whatever the executive's arm said. And that's not cool. I still haven't seen a James Wan movie, and probably ain't going to see no James Wan movie. James Wan's movie's been tampered with the first one. The sequel's being tampered with. I don't think it's going to do well either. So for me, we continue to say restore the Snyderverse. We stay united on that. Do understand that history repeats itself, and what happened to Jesus is happening today and onwards and onwards, and it will continue to happen to people who seem to always shake the system, who seem to always start to amplify and make us have to think beyond, and also people who seem to point us to ourselves, showing us something that makes us see ourselves. Maybe we don't like what we see. Sometimes we admire what we see. But I'm just saying that if somebody's making you introspective or challenging you or forcing you to think about things differently and how you've been judging yourself, don't hate them as public enemy number one. Love them and thank them for letting you see a little bit more about yourself. Let us see a little bit more about humanity. And remember, we're not immune from doing the very same things these executives are doing. So don't just point the finger at them and say, oh, it's their fault. No, no, look at yourself. Look at yourself first. Be introspective and say, am I doing that? Am I so bigoted? And I know I've done it. I'm so bigoted that I think it's only me. I'm authority on this. And I'm going to let them have it. And I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to silence you. Or that. Think about what I'm saying. Okay? It's not just about movies. It's not just about Zack Snyder. It's not just about Tim Burton, Denis Villeneuve, Martin Scorsese. No, it's an attitude. We have to be careful about our attitudes to each other. We live in a world where we need to show more love and care and less destructive nature just for self-preservation or just to aggrandize oneself and big up oneself and make oneself look so great. You know what I'm saying? I know this is a business I do, but at the same time, if I better somebody's day, if somebody looks at themselves in the mirror and says, you know what? I need to adjust this in my life somehow, some way. Even if you start with that, that's great. Because that's the whole point of everything. So that we can at least be the better person today than we were yesterday. And even if we're not, try to be. All right? I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We went on about 2 hours. I got to go wet some plants. Got finished eating my food. I still haven't finished eating my food. Restore the Snyderverse is what I'm pushing. My campaign is Zack Snyder Justice League and IMAX. I've been doing a poll on Twitter. We have had, I think it's over 1,000 and something votes right now. So I hope you guys would, if you guys are on Twitter, look for my Twitter handle. It is APGM46. That's my Twitter handle. APGM46. Check that out. And you guys can go on there and vote. The vote is, I was going to put it up on YouTube, but I said I'm just keep it on Twitter. You guys can vote about the upcoming Warner Brother Pictures movies that are coming up. So there's, you got the Aquaman movie. That's in December. You also got Wonka, which is coming up in December. You have The Color Purple. And then I inserted Zack Snyder's Justice League in November to fill up the Dune 2 spot. So you guys can vote for whichever one you think you want to have. The reason I'm doing that is so that Abdi and DeLuca could see the demand for Zack Snyder's Justice League. It doesn't have to be an accurate poll representing, but the numbers. When you look at how many people want the movie, that's the important thing. So if you guys can do me a favor, get all your friends, get everybody to go down on Twitter to my my Twitter handle. It's pinned to the top of my Twitter page. So you go on my profile, and at the top of the profile is the poll, right? And just vote there. So if you know people outside of Facebook, outside of Twitter, wherever on social media, bring them all down. They don't have to like Zack Snyder's Justice League. They don't have to like any of those things. I just want them to see the poll. And if they want to vote, they vote. And then retweet, please. I would like this to go, if possible, what is the word I'm looking for? On social media when it goes viral. I would love it to go viral. That would be great. So we can get as much people to contribute. Because, see, it's not about winning the poll. It's none of that. It's just about the numbers. So when I look at the percentage and I look at how many people, let's say 2 million people vote, right? What's the percentage of that 2 million that voted for Zack Snyder's Justice League? That's what I want you guys to understand. So it doesn't matter if people win the poll or not. We just need tremendous amounts of numbers. If we can get tremendous amounts of numbers, what will happen is it will make news. And when it makes news, now I want to say, I don't care who does the poll. You can go look at my poll and then you can make your own poll. I don't care what you do. But at the end of the day, we want a poll where people are picking Zack Snyder's Justice League. That is significant numbers that Warner Brother Pictures cannot ignore. That's what we want. I would love to do it on YouTube as well, or some prominent YouTube channel do it as well and get some numbers from there as well. That's what needs to be done. The reason Abdi and DeLuca called in Keanu Reeves was because they saw him on CBS talking about wanting to do a Constantine 2 movie. And the reaction on CBS was so great that they called him in to have talks. Money talks, BS walks. We want Zack Snyder's Justice League in cinemas and IMAX. You got to shake up The world. And the only way you're going to shake him up is by getting big numbers. And if they see big numbers on Twitter, yeah, they see a poll where 2 million people voted. They see a poll where 10 million people voted. They're not going to ignore that. They're not going to ignore it. That's what we need. I'm going to catch you guys later. I am Christ, I am disciple, aka Anson Phillip. I hope you guys had a good one. I hope you guys learned something or you got something from this. God bless you. Good afternoon and good night.